Was there an Adam? Was there an Eve? Or did we evolve from what we conceived? Either way, we got what we needed when the sun shone down on the Garden of Eden.
Don't you know we're gonna have a Solartopia, Solartopia, Solartopia. Don't you know we're gonna have a Solartopia all over God's green world.
Hello, everyone. This is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman back for the 16th, if you can believe that, the 16th 90-minute Zoom call of the Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition. And it is 9 weeks to Armageddon, and which is Election Day, November 3rd, where nothing will be decided. Basically, the terrain of the lawsuits will be decided in the months of litigation and confrontation that will follow this presidential election. But it is more than just the presidential election, and we're looking at the complete remake of the American system and how we govern. We have more than 50 people on the line, including my old student, Kirk Bampton. Kirk, you are my first former student to come on with us. And we are engineered by Mike Hurst and co-hosted, co-convened by the great Joel Siegel, who is in North Carolina. I want to start. We are going to devote the third half hour of this 90-minute call to your questions, comments, arguments, whatever. We have remarkably escaped any kind of sectarian, secular infighting on these calls, and I want to keep it that way. We have no personal attacks, and we are no deep ideological debates. What we really want to do is the nitty-gritty of the upcoming election and how we and the rest of the world will deal with this Armageddon event. I want to start with some actually monumental news, which we have discussed a number of times. The idea of using sports arenas for voting centers. The idea was inaugurated by the Atlanta Hawks. I then wrote a piece about it, who volunteered their arena. I don't know the detail of how that happened, but the Atlanta Hawks a while ago volunteered their arena for a voting center. We decided, or we discussed, it was a really good idea. I put a piece about that at Reader Supported News, advocating the use of sports arenas, including indoor basketball and hockey arenas, as well as baseball and football stadia. And then in the course of our discussions, the great former mayor of Charlotte, Jennifer Roberts, took the idea and ran with it in Charlotte, and we wound up with the Hornets Stadium and the what's your basketball team now? It's not the Bobcats. It's the Hornets are the basketball team. Arena. The football team is the Panthers.
That's correct.
That became a reality, and we learned in the last few days, I'm sure at the behest of LeBron James, who really should be our next president, that he would be a great president, actually, and he would be as tall as Abraham Lincoln with the top hat. That the NBA has now committed to every team-owned arena becoming a voting center, which is monumental.
Sorry, I just want to mention that, Michael Jordan is majority owner of the Hornets, and Michael Jordan traditionally has been apolitical and has not gotten involved in politics, and he stood up to offer the Hornets arena as well. And this is sort of monumental that Michael Jordan is getting out of his apolitical stance, because remember, he's the one that said Republicans buy tennis shoes too.
Actually, sneakers.
Sneakers. Yes. Anyway, basketball shoes. So no, this is a big deal, and a lot of people I know who are very worried about mailing now are going to stand in line in an arena where there is thousands of square feet of lots of open space, even though it's indoors, huge high ceilings, plenty of safe places to stand in line, and people are very excited about that. 17 days of early voting for like 11 hours a day. Those sites will be open. It's terrific.
I mean, that is a major change in American democracy, because we might as well put it. We're on tape here. Everybody listening, I'm sure, knows this, but it means there'll be no more outdoor lines. You will show up to vote. You'll get a number. You go into the stadium. There'll be tons of room. You can wear your mask. You can social distance. You can shoot hoops. There will probably be food. There are facilities, and here's the big one: there will be no guns, because we know that the Trump Nazis are going to be out there with their guns, and this means people can go inside and get away. And I mean, it is monumental. Now we'll have to carry this forward to cities and towns that don't have pro basketball teams. So that means the next step will go to the colleges and the high schools, and make those arenas into voting centers as well. Now, you're saying, Jennifer, that in North Carolina, it will not be on Election Day. It will be in early voting.
Yeah, only during early voting. On Election Day, people are used to going to their precinct, and we have about 200 precincts in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. So, and that's close to their area. But any of the 17 days, including 2 Sundays, people can go and early voting to the arena and the stadium.
Well, it's going to turn voting from a chore to fun. I mean, who's not going to want to go to the stadium and hang out and and get hot dogs and be indoors and party? I mean, it's going to be fantastic.
For some people, they've never been able to afford a ticket to get in there in the first place.
Wow.
Right? Yeah.
So I think it's a spectacular thing. We owe you a great debt, Jennifer. I know you and LeBron have been tight for many years, and also Michael. So I have a question. Can you dunk? Sorry. Okay.
I did go to college with Michael Jordan, and I know Michael Jordan. I've met him many times, including when I was mayor, because I played volleyball and they played in the same arena, so we would see each other coming on and off the court. So I could dunk when I was 20 years old. Not anymore.
You're 22 now, so it should be all right. Anyway, it's fantastic. It really is very exciting. And it also indicates a very strong political movement in this country. I mean, this is a very big deal. What has happened overnight almost to the NBA and even the NFL and even Major League Baseball, which has always been extremely conservative. And it really shows how much clout our sports people have, and where their priorities have gotten now. I mean, this is what's happening now with sports and this election and voting is really, you have to consider it to be revolutionary. I know we're going into the weeds here, or the weed a little bit, but the reality is that LeBron James is now pouring significant time and effort into voting. Now, we don't know exactly what he's doing, but he has bought ads and made his presence extremely tangible in terms of voting issues. And I know Jennifer Tanner has been working with his people, and there is no more powerful person that we can have in our corner than LeBron James. So let's just hope that this continues, and he continues. He's got really good political instincts, and I think that he probably understands the issues very well, especially coming from Akron. Yes, Jennifer.
He's a great role model. It's great to get young people out. We couldn't have asked for a better spokesperson. And athletes, the WNBA is also getting out there with Maya and others who are just voicing how important it is to vote. So this is terrific. It's terrific news. They're doing exactly what needs to be done to motivate people, to give them a reason. And now with the sports arenas, we're giving them a safe means as well. So, but yes, we can't let up.
Spectacular. Okay, does anybody else want to say anything about this? I know for you people who are not, some of you are not sports fans, but we are all political junkies. And, the role of people in sports and politics has escalated, and now it's at a peak. And we have to, I think we have to understand that these men and women who are our sports heroes are really, really smart and have been dealing with this. I mean, I have met, as a sports journalist, I have met Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Larry Bird, and I mean, they are amazing people. I had a 15-minute conversation with Magic Johnson. He could be president as well. He's a brilliant businessman, and we all have been reading Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's written stuff. So, you know, this is a huge deal, and God help us, you know, we're really in the thick of it now. So, and as all of you know, us guys and women who play sports could talk about forever. So let's cut it off before we go too much deeper. One thing we do want to mention, we want to get into this later, early voting, which is a huge deal now, will be happening in the stadia, and we'll want to talk to Steve Rosenfeld about this. Will early voting be done on paper ballots in this country, or are they going to stick it with electronic machines again? That's something I want to come back to, because I know, Joel, you have brought on some really very important people from North Carolina, along with Jennifer Roberts here, the former mayor of Charlotte. So let me turn it over to you. We can start our state-by-state discussions with North Carolina, not only because you're on the phone, but because of the incredible job you've been doing making North Carolina not only organized for its own self, but as a template for where we need to go with our state-by-state organizing. So, Joel, do you want to take it over and tell us what's going on in North Carolina, please?
Yeah, thank you, Harvey, for bringing us all together. Thank you, everybody, for being on this call. I do want to say I went to high school with Jennifer Roberts, and I did play high school basketball. I think I played a total of 8 minutes for the 4 years that I played in East Mecklenburg, but we were practicing one day, and she went up for a dunk over me, and she broke the backboard, and it splintered, literally glass everywhere, and like Shaquille O'Neal, and it was a very amazing, no, I'm kidding. Well, let's see. No, but she was a basketball star and a volleyball star at UNC Chapel Hill, where I went to school. We have an incredible coalition of organizations, over 25 in North Carolina. It was primarily built by Charles Stephenson, former legislative director for Congressman Dellums, the legendary Congressman Dellums, former first vice chair of Wake County Democrats, and Charles has been quite spectacular. So Charles, if it's okay, if you can, talk about where we're at in terms of our North Carolina, efforts, and then Mayor Roberts, if you can also talk about how we're going to do these weekly calls. And thank you, Jennifer, for agreeing to do the Zoom. But if you both can kind of summarize what we're doing, that'd be fantastic. And I'll add a little bit near the end. Go ahead, Reverend Stevenson. You're on mute, man.
Oh.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Michael? Okay. Yeah. Several weeks ago, we noticed, I'm talking the North Carolina members of the coalition noticed that we were, on the call together, and we thought it made sense for us to reach out to the other nonpartisan, non-profit organizations who are doing this voter protection work, voter suppression work on a daily basis, such as Democracy NC, Blueprint, You Can Vote, Validate the Vote, and some other groups of that ilk. And we thought it made a lot of sense for us on the members of this coalition to reach out to them, to talk to them about how we could best coordinate our efforts. And last Thursday, we had a gem of a meeting. We were able to discuss issues from the need for volunteers, the need to develop a strategy around early voting. We also talked about the various tools that some of the organizations have in reference to training and some of their websites, their films on the websites, and other ways that they can train and instruct volunteers. So it was just a really, really good call. We also working on, as a result of that, we're working on a statewide radio buy, particularly focusing on Black and Hispanic and gospel stations. And right now we want to focus it on the early voting. So we have a couple of weeks to get that together. And looking at the possibility of doing billboards around the state. So because if you've been to North Carolina, you know that freeway, the highway is a major thoroughfare, and having billboards on our highway is a good way to communicate with voters. So again, we thought it was a really good call. I know I'm probably leaving a couple of things out, Joel and Jennifer, you guys can fill in the gaps, but I think it's a good way for us to operate. In reference to, if you have folks on this coalition who are working in states, and you know that there are groups, organizations in your states that are doing this work on a daily basis, it behooves us to reach out to them to see how we can best coordinate our efforts. And that's what we've done here in North Carolina, and it's working out. Joel.
Well, Joel and Mr. Chamberlain, can you tell us, Stevenson, can you tell us the organizations that you have brought in to the coalition? This is critical because we're trying to build coalitions in every state, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida, Arizona. We need to know what organizations have you brought into North Carolina and what are they doing to give us a broad-based grassroots effort here?
Okay, well, quickly, the first one I'll start out with is You Can Vote, which is a nonpartisan organization that really focuses most of their information, most of their work around trying to pull together volunteers, doing phone banking, and again, their work is essentially around getting out the vote and voter education, voter registration, training volunteers on how to be more effective in those areas. And they're also working in the whole area of student voting, working in various colleges and universities to ensure that college students do get out to vote. Another organization is called Validate the Vote. And this particular organization, which is run by Lynn Bernstein, and she may be on the call, and she could talk a little bit better than I can about what she does. But essentially, her organization is concerned about validating the votes on election day and making sure that the digital rolls match up. And I think that's a very, very important task. So they're part of the coalition. Blueprint, which is another state organization, also working around voter registration and focus a lot of efforts around GOTV. In the past, they have also sponsored billboards around the state, and we're trying to encourage them to do that again. And they put together some voting guides that can be used so people know how and when they can vote. The other one is Democracy NC, and Democracy NC is focusing a lot of their work right now on GOTV and volunteering, organizing volunteers around the state. And I think the other one is Andrea Miller. Is she on the call? Although she's not from North Carolina, she's doing a lot of work in North Carolina, the Center for Common Ground, and they're also at the table. And I may have missed a couple more, but those are essentially the major organizations that we're bringing in.
All right,
Joel?
so Charles and Joel, can we publish a list of the coalition members so that people in other states can see how successful and what kinds of organizations? Joel, have you had any luck with the NAACP or the League of Women Voters?
Well, I also want to mention John BRAKEY has been instrumental in this as well. The first organization that we went to was the African American Caucus, and they're statewide. And then the North Carolina postal workers just joined our effort. The Union County Senior Democrats, that Evelyn Maven Hall is one of the leaders. The Alliance of Moral Progressive Democrats of America. Yesterday, we brought in several African American fraternities and sororities. We brought in younger African American groups that work on voting, both in South Carolina and North Carolina. We've brought in green organizations. We've brought in groups that work on homelessness. So we're not just staying with the voting groups. We're going outside that arena because all the groups that I mentioned have a stake, in this election. But we started the meeting with 2 leading African-American state legislators. And that was to set the tone that we're dead serious. And then Charles already had a lot of connections with a lot of folk. I do want to mention 3 very important things. Number one is there is Jennifer. This is Ziad Rabia's significant other called me yesterday and said that they wanted to get absentee ballots from people who are physically and mentally challenged. And the Mecklenburg Board of Elections said that they were not allowed to pick up those absentee ballots. So that's of course discrimination. So how are people who are blind, hearing impaired, in wheelchairs supposed to get their ballots? It's only, that would be close to impossible. So that's an issue that we have to deal with in Mecklenburg County.
Joel, there's an online way to request a ballot.
Cool. So so what we're starting now that we're starting, it was Harvey's idea to get embedded into the Mecklenburg County Board of Elections. So one of our state representatives is going to introduce us to former, I don't know if she was state senator or state representative Beverly Earl. I think it was state representative. Is that right, Jennifer? She's
right.
on the, yeah,
Yep.
she's on. So we're going to be meeting with her to talk about voter suppression, absentee ballots. How are they going to count them? There's been a deficit of volunteers and paid volunteers to get people to the polls to count the absentee ballots. So I'm in touch with an organization that used to be out of New York City. These are very high-level people in the entertainment business that John Brakey introduced me to that might be on this call. Thank you, John. And Eric Cohen. And Eric Cohen is connected to an organization of young people who are trained and paid to work at the polls and to be paid to do the work of the Board of Elections work that needs to be done. So what's happening is, because we formed the coalition, everything is starting to happen rapidly. And what Charles' idea is, what we're going to focus on next Thursday at 4 o'clock is early voting. Charles wants us to do public service announcements. He's already gotten the buys in terms of how much it would cost to do it on gospel stations, R&B stations, and Hispanic stations. We just need the money to do that. And that, we have South Carolina organized through Reverend Leo Woodbury, but Reverend Woodbury, I don't know if he's on the call. This is the big central problem that we're dealing with is we have the infrastructure, we're ready to go. We just have the funding, and Harvey's been doing a great job on that. So that's the end of my report. John Brakey, did you want to say anything, or Evelyn, regarding North Carolina? Or anybody from North Carolina on the call?
Well, the only thing that I would add, this is John Brakey, and thanks for calling on me, is that we are in the process of putting a letter to the state board and to all 76 counties that have digital. We are very concerned about making sure that these images by law are saved properly, and we're asking people to sign on to this letter. And then secondly, which is very important, is the vote by mail that is coming in, which looks like it's going to be a lot bigger than ever before. Are they sorting it into precincts? These are concerns that we have, and typically if they get rid of the images and not sorting the ballot, sorting the regular ballots into precincts, that's a place of possible vulnerability. That's all I got to say. Thank
Right,
you.
and then the big
Can I jump in real quick?
please, Charles.
Yeah. Is Lynn Bernstein, is she on the call?
Lynn Bernstein, are you with us? I don't see her, Charles.
I think she is.
Oh, okay, Lynn, unmute. Lynn also is in North Carolina.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure her and John, I don't know if they probably do know each other, but if they don't, they should.
Okay.
When I go to North Carolina, I stay at her house.
Oh, okay.
Her daughters are like my granddaughters.
Okay, all right, that's good.
Can I intercede for just a moment?
Please,
Can I intercede well, first of all, in reference to what Joel was saying about people not being able to get the absentee ballot, You can request it by mail, but there are specific people who must request it for you. It has to be a near relative,
Right.
or it just can't be anyone. I have that problem with a friend of mine that we look out for. He's disabled, and I wanted to get an absentee ballot for him. I'm his power of attorney, but they said, no, it has to be a specific person. He doesn't have any near relatives here. So there are some rules that just don't make sense. But also in reference to things that are going on, I just spoke to, emailed Andrea Miller just a while ago. And as you know, they're an organization out of Virginia that's working with a lot of different states and have made tremendous progress in her state of Virginia. And they're trying to make a change in North Carolina and Alabama, Georgia, some of the other states. And one of the things she said to me is that she needs to, well, they were trying to get the purge list. And as of today's date, they were fairly certain they would get it. But as of today's date, they haven't gotten it. If they don't get the purge list, they're going to use the inactive voter list. But I think it would be phenomenal if we could get the purge list. They've been working with, I don't know if anyone on the call knows him, but they've been working with a young man called Damon Circosta, Circosta. He's the chairman of the North Carolina State Board of Elections. So if anybody has any information about him or any contact, maybe reaching out to him would help the Center for Common Ground get that list. The Alliance, AmpAmerica.org, the Alliance for More Progressives, which I'm a member of, we are working with them. And they are also doing things such as phone banking, texting, motor vote. They said they're going to get billboards, and I know billboards are like $1,500 each, but they're going to put them across different counties. But they're missing out on contacts in some of the counties, such as Anson, Beaufort. I have a list of all the counties that they want to get on board. We're going to have a Zoom conference with Andrea Miller. So I'd like to get information from all of you so that you can invite all of your organizations to be on call. We're going to have the Poor People's Campaign will be on call, the NAACP, and some other Indivisible and some other groups. But we want to get as many, she can host 1,000 people. So we want to get as many people on call as possible so you can find out more about what she's doing. And it's going to be on the Wednesday, September 9th at 7 p.m. So for those who are interested, let us know. I'm sorry.
Put that in the chat. Make sure Mike has it. We'll mail it to everybody. We'll make sure everybody's got the connections for that.
That's real good.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I'm going to be quiet because I know there are a lot of people on call who want to speak, but I just want to share that information.
Harvey, one last thing too.
Please, please.
One thing that we're doing too, which is really exciting, is there's a large interfaith organization. We're going to have a Zoom town hall meeting and teach-in to primarily Black and Hispanic voters and the HBCUs and the university, the students. We've got to get the students to vote. We've got to get the Black and brown up. So we're going to do a Zoom call. We're going to do it through the African American Caucus and through some African American churches. We're going to teach people about absentee ballot. How do you fill them out? What are the laws around it? Anything about early voting? Because when we interview people, I'm going to post an interview that I did when I was playing at a music store, and this guy came up to me and we started talking. He said, I said, "Are you going to vote?" He says, "I'm going to vote, but I don't know how to vote. I don't know what to do. I got an absentee ballot in the mail." This is a critical problem in our state. People don't know what to do with the absentee ballots. We know that in Iowa, a judge said that 50,000 ballots that were or what do you call it when you do the absentee ballot with the information? He threw them out. 50,000 just went in and threw them out. And a Trump guy. But we feel like intensive education of voters is essential. Yes, we got to protect the vote, but we got to make sure that people actually go and vote, whether it's absentee or in person. But people are very confused about what to do. They don't know what to do. And that's why Charles wants to do the PSAs and billboards, and why we want to do intensive voter education. I'm hoping on the call, in our half an hour, I really hope that from here on out, we've gotten great education, but now we've got to hear from you. We have to hear from everybody about, well, what do you think we ought to do?
Well, this is what you've done in North Carolina is exactly what we have to do nationwide, state by state, which is work with existing grassroots organizations to get them all involved. We're not going to build our own structure. We're going to build the coalition of the groups that really are on the case and that are perfectly situated. And so, Joel, what we'll do, if I can get from you, we'll take your list, you and Charles, and we'll take the list of groups and the contacts of the groups that you have signed up into your coalition and send them around the country so that the other swing states can build their coalitions in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, everywhere, because what you're doing in North Carolina is what has to happen nationwide. Does anyone have any questions for Joel and Charles before we move on? Okay, we have gone generally state by state, but since we're emphasizing coalition building, Charlie, I want to move to Charlie Cray from my Greenpeace, my alma mater here. I am still a voting member since 1991. And Evelyn Maben Hall, also, I want to thank you. You had me speak to the Union County group, and I really appreciated that by Zoom, and we should all be speaking to these grassroots groups. It's extremely important, and I was honored to be able to do that, and I appreciate it. So Charlie, we're gonna come back to some of the states, and we'll talk to Steve Rosenfeld also. Thank you, Evelyn.
We were honored to have you. You were awesome. Yeah,
I appreciate that, and we'll
motivated
do it
us.
again. And also, you know, we are all available, Joel and everybody else who's Steve, and I'm sure Mimi, whoever we can be doing, we're available to talk to Zoom calls to groups. I just volunteer to other people, but this is a big part of our organizing, and Zoom allows us to do this without traveling around. So it's a big deal. Charlie Cray, my old buddy from Greenpeace, Greenpeace has a list of 500,000 people that they mail to. Their demographic is younger, and there is no more fun activist organization than Greenpeace. It's the only kids club with a Navy. So Charlie, can you explain to us what you guys are doing, and we'll bring Brittany in also. It's very exciting and extremely important.
Thanks, Harvey. Great to also shout out to Harriet Barlow, one of our old board members. And Falabi Olabaju is our democracy campaign coordinator, and I believe he's on here, so he can correct any errors. And thanks, Mike, Joel, and to you, of course, Harvey, for organizing these. We've been on a few of these, and we've learned a lot. Traditionally, other big green groups handle election strategy, like the League of Conservation Voters and Sierra Club. We've been stepping into this space for very obvious reasons. This is all hands on deck, red alert moment, and we've ramped up quickly. The way we look at it is three phases. One is this current pre-election phase. I'm going to go back to that. The next phase will be the kind of meltdown aftermath phase. From November 3rd until there's an outcome. And the third is hopefully the first 100 days of holding Biden accountable to his promises. And the pre-election phase, we've been acquiring lists and mashing them up with our the 500,000 that Harvey referenced to figure out who hasn't voted in recent cycles, who is basically an environmentalist. And we've been testing those lists. We're starting to educate them, make sure they've been checking to see if they're registered and getting ready for the GOTV phase. We've done this by organizing volunteers. We're not making the calls ourselves. We're organizing volunteers. We're putting them through a leadership training program, a 6-week intensive one, so they can use text, phone, and relationship apps. Virtual voter contact type work. We're forming a Latinx engagement group. So we're doing a lot of different work in this initial phase, and a lot of it is testing it out and sorting lists and targeting. Then I and Falabi and others are really developing our November 3rd. I don't know, Harvey, if you want me to go into this. It's not been the content of most of these calls, but basically we're joining other groups to, get ready for the battle of the 3rd and beyond. And we're, for instance, part of the Protect the Results Coalition that Indivisible and Stand Up America formed with Move On and others. There are now 83 organizations that are partners in that are getting ready to defend our democracy and make sure every vote is counted, starting in advance of November 3rd. There's the DFAD coalition, the Fight Back Table. We've got a bunch of sort of mass mobilization practitioners, people who have been in the streets for fighting wars and, ever since Seattle. There's a lot of people out there. There's a group called Shut Down DC that was outside the White House last week did a noise out to try to disrupt Trump's speech with they call a Trump's Gotta Go flatbed music jam. We also have seen protests at Louis DeJoy's residence. Basically that's been going on for a couple weeks. And as you all know, Move On and other groups.
All right, somebody's got to mute. Erode Garcia. Okay, go ahead.
So, anyway, I'll.
Amen.
So Charlie,
Amen.
Are you? Is Greenpeace involved in some of the nitty-gritty election protection stuff?
Certified free.
Bro, honestly, shut up, faggot.
Charlie, we have a little interference there. Are you in doing a nitty-gritty grassroots groups to prevent the election theft? Are you working with other groups like Joel in North Carolina on the?
No, not yet.
Okay, so we want you, if we can, to jump in there. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, well, Falabi and I'll talk after. We have some target states that we're going to be doing deeper outreach work, and we'll reach out to some of you about that to get connected with the coalition.
Oh, we have a disruptor named Daniel on there, so if we can get rid of him, Mike, that'd be great. You're working with Brittany. Brittany, can you unmute? Brittany, you're with, tell us about your group that you're working with Greenpeace as well. Brittany. Okay, I don't see Brittany yet.
Brittany's there, she's waving. She's with the Democracy Initiative, which is a large...
Okay, Mike, can we unmute the Democracy Initiative?
Perfect, thanks.
Hi,
folks.
Okay, go ahead, yes.
Hello, my name is Brittany Baxter, and I am the Training and Movement Building Coordinator for the Democracy Initiative. We are a coalition, excuse me, sorry, my 7-year-old is, no, guys,
okay.
We just want to, excuse me, give me 1 second, folks.
Okay, so the Democracy Coalition, as I understand it, does training. I'm not sure if you're coordinating with the scrutineers, but if you are, that's great. Danette, did you want to jump in real quick? You're waving a hand.
Can you give me co-hosting? I'll get rid of these bombers.
Mike, that's between you and Mike. I think they're gone. The one is, there's another one, Eli, and another one, Elijah, but we'll get rid of them as best we can.
There's a bunch.
Okay, well, that's to be expected now. We've been pretty lucky so far, and we are continuing with the call. So far, we're okay. Brittany, when you come back,
Danette.
Drop the OnlyFans. Okay, we're having some interference there, but we'll deal with it. This comes with the territory. Wow, they're really out in force today. I want to mention Virginia Martin is on the call. Virginia, you've been an election official in New York. You've done great work. We really appreciate you And do you want to chime in real quick about what's been going on in New York?
Oh, hey, thanks, Harvey. Yeah, I'm kind of focusing on other states, frankly, because, the swing states are where it's at. So that's kind of what I've been doing. And I think a lot of people in New York are doing that too. So, I'm happy that we are.
Okay. And where are you working, Virginia? What states are you working on?
I'm doing North Carolina, Texas, Michigan. I don't know what the other states are that people are working on, but we're really worried about swing states. That's what we're doing.
Okay. Well, thank you. It was glad to have you on board. I'm glad you're on our list. Steve Rosenfeld, I wanted to ask you real quickly. Thank you, Virginia. One of the big questions we're going to be looking at is how is early voting going to be conducted? We spent a lot of time talking about vote by mail, and we've been discussing the option of early voting, and we now have these arenas to do early voting in. The question is, when people come in to early vote, will they be able to get paper ballots, or will they be voting on machines, and how do we affect that?
Well, what I heard this morning on a bipartisan policy center Zoom call from Washington was that there's going to be a mix of the ballot marking device machines for people who are disabled and in a lot of the in-person voting places. There's a question whether or not people will be able to drop off their ballots. Certainly, it's more of an issue on election day than it is with early voting. And I think that these decisions are being made now, and it's really hard to get a national perspective. I heard in San Diego County, California, it's not a swing state. They're going to have 125 staffed drop-off places for absentee ballots. Everyone in the county, everyone in the state is getting mailed a ballot. They're still going to have several hundred in-person voting places. They're going to have 4 days of early voting. The biggest thing I heard, Harvey, that people have not really talked about is this. Because of COVID and the staffing requirements and the health requirements, the in-person process, people are saying, is going to be slower than what it normally is. And people are trying to figure this out. And when any polling place hits 80% of capacity, they're saying that's when the bottlenecks start and the traffic starts backing up. So I can't tell you be more specific than that, but that's the latest that I've heard. So there's going to be a mix of the technologies on hand in those counties already, redeployed in these sort of newly reconfigured sites. There may actually be less throughput if you really hit higher volumes because of just the way everything is going to be done. Specifically, like wiping off screens if you have touch screens, or not everybody's going to have a mask. Maybe they want to have a mask. If you don't have a mask, they're going to tell you to go outside if the climate is good and vote from out in an outside location or from your car, curbside. This is the kind of stuff that people are trying to work out right now. I should just mention to people on this call one other thing that I have written about as a reporter. This is a big deal. A lot of people, when they applied to vote by mail in the primaries, were given a form in their state where they had multiple boxes to check. Do you want a ballot for the upcoming election or the rest of the year? A lot of people only check the upcoming election, and that means they're not lined up to get an absentee ballot for the fall. The numbers in Wisconsin are 500,000 people who voted in the April primary did not check the box for the fall. 800,000 did, 500,000 didn't. Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin all have these forms with these choices on them. And they won't tell me in Michigan or Pennsylvania what the actual numbers are. What the states are doing is they're doing mailings, and they're telling everybody these are your options, but it's soft pedaling it a little bit. They're not being explicit in saying you necessarily need to, they're implying that if you get a mailing with a reminder, you need to do this, but they're not saying, hey, you only signed up for April, you didn't sign up for November. So that's a big deal. And I just mentioned that because it's just one of those places where people might be falling through the cracks and not know it until things get a little bit late. Thank you.
Wow. Okay, thank you, Steve. So this is another complication we're going to have to deal with, probably in every state. We're going to have to look into the complication that people who did not sign a certain box to get their ballot for the primary are going to have to re-request the ballot for the fall. It's ridiculous, but that's the reality. Thank you, Steve, and we'll keep everybody posted on that. Again, it's 9 weeks to Armageddon, and that's what we're going to deal with. Okay, Brittany Baxter, we have you unmuted. Real quickly, do you want to fill us in again on your group?
Absolutely. Sorry about the interruption earlier. Today was the first day of school, so lots of chaos in the house, folks. As I said before, the Democracy Initiative is a national coalition. We have 75 partner organizations with a combined membership of 45 million. We have organized labor, the AFL-CIO. We have good government groups like Common Cause, the NAACP. We have, excuse me, groups like Greenpeace, Sierra Club, Center for Environmental Health. These are all partners that we're working with in the target states where they have a presence to train, educate, mobilize folks to have a plan for the election for this cycle and to identify what their plan is going to be and also recruit folks to place in positions in the election cycle to either volunteer as poll workers, poll monitors, or to stand at polls and support folks and defend against voter intimidation, which we are anticipating is going to be significantly higher this cycle. We are targeting 13 states to do this work in, and these are the swing states of Michigan, Maryland, no, it's on the wall. Florida, New Mexico, Missouri, North Carolina, Michigan, Texas, Georgia. There are a few others, but those are the key states that we're targeting so that we can ensure that we have voters who have a plan for how to vote. They understand that they need to know the rules and the deadlines in their state so that they're getting quality information and not misinformation. Because what we've seen consistently across the board is that specifically Black and brown folks have a significantly higher rates of distrust for vote by mail. And so we need to make sure that folks understand what the rules are and use that to make a plan and identify trustworthy validators so that they're not spreading disinformation and misinformation. And then to use those, and then to tap into those same folks, mobilize them to play a role in the election, to also have conversations with their networks. So they're telling everyone else in their networks to make a plan. And then to stand up and step up and volunteer, because we know that it took 900,000 volunteers to make the 2016 election work. And we're anticipating that because a significant number of those poll workers and those volunteers are over the age of 60, that they will not be returning. And so we need to fill that gap with other groups.
Now, if you will put in the chat how to contact your organization, we'll list you as an affiliate organization, and people will be able to, and how people can get directly a hold of you. That would be great if you put it in the chat. We'd appreciate it. You're also working in Georgia, I understand. And
yes.
Are you affiliated with Stacey Abrams?
So I actually I was a regional in Middle Georgia for Stacey before I went to work for Andrew Gillum in Florida. So this is just my wall of accomplishments. Okay. But we do work with the New Georgia Project. We do work with Pro Georgia, Common Cause Georgia, a lot of groups on the ground. We prioritize the grassroots strategy. So we just come in and we support the work that they're already doing because they know how to talk to their members. They know how to talk to folks on the ground. And so we just offer support.
I have a question, Harvey.
Yes, please.
Is it Brittany? I couldn't see your name.
Brittany.
Yes, it's Brittany. Hi.
Hello. What a dynamic woman you are, and activist. I wanted to ask you a question. We know that the Republican Party and the Trump dictatorship is what I call it. Brittany, they're going to spend $20 million to suppress the vote. They're going to put 50,000 people across the country to suppress the vote.
Absolutely.
Okay. What we know is that that's what they're doing. Then we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing? And the Democratic Party, of which I've been a member of 40 years, this is nonpartisan, has a fragmented response to voter suppression that I think is quite poor, which means that that's going to be up to us being us activists who believe in voting. I was the lead staffer in Congress on universal health care. I wrote the bill called Medicare for All. I want to invoke the ancestors, and one of them being Representative John Conyers, who I was had the honor to work for 13 years. And then Charles Stevenson worked for Congressman Dellums for decades. If Mr. Connors was on this call, I know what he would say. He would say, Segal, how come you have all these groups everywhere? This is the most important election of our lifetime, Segal. I want you to get a meeting right now of all the different organizations, and let's come up with a comprehensive strategy, because we're in a very dangerous period. The question I want to ask you is, A, why shouldn't we not do that? Could we perhaps do a national organizers call with as many groups as possible so we can find out exactly who we are, form an ad hoc working group or network, coordinate our efforts, fund where necessary, because we're in a very dangerous situation right now. But the fragmentation is not that we have to organize differently. That'd be my question to someone as dynamic as you, Brittany.
So it's a great question. It's one that the Democracy Initiative was actually created to address, right? So we recognize that democracy spaces tend to be much older, much wider, more male, and there's a huge disconnect between the folks that we're trying to engage, to re-engage and reincorporate into our new vision for what democracy is supposed to look like, one that is inclusive of everyone in the United States, representative of, and so what we do at the Democracy Initiative, what we are pushing through our members, our 75 partner organizations, is being on the same page about what the narrative is going to be and shifting to a positive narrative, because we have a tendency to feed into the rights narrative and it's negative. And so we are also, what we've seen happening is the left has been absorbing a negative narrative and then unintentionally suppressing votes, the votes that we need to mobilize the most. And so I think that the most effective way to do this is to bring as many of these groups together, because they're going to be groups that are going to be focused on very specific aspects of this cycle. There are a lot of new groups who are coming in and that have been created to address this specific work. And they're competing with groups that do this work and have been doing this work for 70 years. And so I think that the most effective way to do this is identify as many of those groups to get them together, create some kind of a platform where we can keep all of that information together. So, and I'll use the example of how we do our training. So what we're doing with our trainings, the training that I offer comes two ways. They're either standalone trainings that we come in and facilitate for your membership by itself, or we have versions of the trainings that can be incorporated into existing trainings so that the narrative is included. And then when we have trainings in various states, we had one recently with Black Voters Matter and APRI in North Carolina. We are starting to have weekly trainings for the UAW, Region 9A, starting this Thursday. We've created trainings in collaboration with the NAACP. And so the best way to do this is to create templates and language and messaging that can then be applied and tailored specifically to the states and the groups that you're talking to. So what we do when we do these trainings, we trained about 70, we've had 70 folks go through our train the trainer. They're then given access to a Google Drive that has state-specific information, tools, one-pagers about how to vote by mail, how to protect your vote, how to make a plan, all of those things, and they're given access to that so that they can then tailor it and make it specific for their audiences. And that's going to be the same logic that we need to apply to this work for the next 60 days, because too many narratives, the narratives are too disjointed, and we're not connecting the dots for folks who want to understand why it even matters if they're seeing all of the suppression, if they're seeing these attacks on the Postal Service, if they're seeing their votes being purged consistently, right? For folks who have been subject to this before this cycle, this is just it's the same old news. So how are we convincing folks that this cycle is going to be different, right? How are we talking to the folks in Georgia who get purged every cycle and have to fight and get robocalls, disinformation robocalls? How are we talking to them and inspiring them to show up? The same way, how are we talking to folks who are new to being targeted for voter suppression so that they understand how to protect their votes? And I think it all comes down to education, having the same positive messaging, and inoculating folks so that they know that they need to have a plan and that we're not going to have an answer for what the election results are on election night. It's about being patient and knowing that we are going to have to fight past the November 3rd, and identifying volunteers who are going to fill the void and stand in the gap as we're fighting, as we're dealing with the curing process, as we're dealing with the fights in the courts. And honestly, eventually, when we may have to evict some folks from the People's House, that reality is something that we need to be preparing people for now, so that as things start to get a little crazier, as they start to ramp up, as we start to see more attacks, as we start to see the opposition scale up their attacks, folks who are not being paid to do this work, who don't already do this work and understand what's at stake, are not being suppressed or disenfranchised or disenchanted with the process altogether. And I think that's going to be the important part.
Brittany, just a brief follow-up. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
First question, is your information, Brittany, is it in the chat box, your email?
Yeah, or connections.
Okay, here's the last question. I heard everything that you said. Now, when we were on the North Carolina call, which was very challenging to get, there were organizations who said, and it was really cool, we will come and we will come train your people. The problem, though, is we're in an emergency situation where we have a fascist that's about to take over the country. So the structure that I'm kind of looking for is there any structure? You said we got to connect the dots. Is there a way that those of us on this call can challenge each other to connect the dots ourselves, because we're running out of time? How can we do that? Okay.
Absolutely. I think
old school organizing, old school, big coalition. We forgot old school. In the universal health care, we had 1,000 organizations. We met once a week. Can we go back old school?
I mean, so we at the Democracy Initiative, that's how we bring our partners in. Well, now that we get closer, we're going to be meeting weekly. And so I think that that's exactly what it needs to look like. There needs to be a very clear messaging narrative. There needs to be a place that folks can go find information, have solutions, refer to. Yes.
Okay.
And refer to for that, because it all has to be housed in one place, because everyone's making everyone's making one pagers.
One clearinghouse.
Well, that's our website is grassrootsep.org. Well, everybody, this was a magnificent call. Thank you, Mike Hirsch. First time we got visited by crazies. We handled it very well. We did have a roundtable. We will not meet next week on Labor Day, but we will send a list of other Zoom calls to join in. Speaking of diversity, they're going on all over the place. Great to have you with us, Harriet Barlow, and other people who've joined us for the first time. When we start up in 2 weeks, it's going to be pedal to the metal. Let's think about this strike stuff as opposed to being in the streets. Thank you, NBA and LeBron, and thank you, everybody. God help us. We're headed towards the election of our lifetimes, okay? Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great couple of weeks. We'll see you in 2. Mike will post the recording of the call and what's in the chat room. A wonderful group of people. Let's keep going, and let's see if we can save this thing. Take care, everybody.
And so we went digging into the ground and started to burn many things we found. But don't you know we're gonna have a Solartopia, Solartopia, Solartopia. Don't you know we're gonna have a Solartopia all over God's green world.
Well, we multiplied, we needed more. The rich got rich, the poor got sore. The fuel ran scarce, the price jumped high, and so they gave nuclear power a try. But don't you know we're gonna have a Solartopia, Solartopia, Solartopia.